The first thing you want to do is open up the game cartridge. And it just slides open. I'm going to flip open over the PCB, and I'm actually going to use a couple pieces of tape here to tape the cartridge down, cover up some of the contacts near where I am going to be soldering. This is Kapton tape. It's heat resistant and okay to get solder on it, won't melt it. So we do that because we don't really want to get solder on any of these parts. We're going to zoom in here. There we go. We don't want to get solder on any of these joints, on these chips. That would not be very good for it. I'm going to start our soldering iron up. Going to get it to about 700 degrees. And while we're waiting for that, we're going to check the voltage on this battery real quick. 0.07 volts, not very good. So we'll also check the voltage here on our brand new battery. 3.32, perfect. We'll check that again later once it's soldered on. So while the soldering iron's heating up, we'll go over a couple things that you're gonna need. You're gonna need some flux. Ooh. I have paste flux here. It's in not in the best condition, but it'll work. So we got our flux there, some solder wire here, and a brush with the bristles cut off on it. That's for cleaning. And then here we just have a little jar of isopropyl alcohol there. So we got our alcohol out. The first thing we're going to do real quick is clean what looks to be like some residue here. Now you can use 70% or 90% isopropyl alcohol. I prefer 90 because that just means more of it is alcohol, less of it's water, so it will evaporate. So there's probably a little flux residue on there just from the manufacturer. That'll come off, but it's not bad to clean it. So we got our soldering iron set to 700 degrees. This is what the tip looks like right now. See if it'll focus on that. Maybe not. It is a little oxidized. So what that means is we got to wipe it off. Oh no. The whole front fell off of this thing. High quality. My gosh. I think that won't fall off again. So we're going to wipe that off on a wet sponge. It'll look much shinier. So now we are going to get a little bit of solder on our iron. The reason we want that is we want just a little pillow of solder there that's going to make contact. And we also have our solder wick here. So solder wick is just like a copper braided line here with solder flux in it. So we're just going to push this on here and drain up all that flux. You could already see the battery moving. And you can see on the solder wick, there's now solder on there. So we're gonna move up a little bit, get the rest of it. Cool. Okay. That should be good. Our battery is doesn't really want to come off here, so we're gonna try to slide it a little bit, or pry it up here with our tweezers. We'll start on this side. Okay, that's up. You want to go gentle, because if you put a lot of tension on it, that spring action can melt the solder and flick little solder beads all over you, which is not good. So we're going to cut the end off our solder wick, get a fresh piece, and you can see how dirty these contacts are now. So we're going to try to get a little bit of this up with the solder wick. That looks pretty good. And then we're going to clean it after that with the alcohol. Perfect. Whenever you put your soldering iron away, you need to apply, you don't always have to clean it before you do this, but you need to apply a little bit of solder to it. We're going to put that away for a second. Get our alcohol brush back out. Clean these up. Yeah, that's looking nice. Cool. So these are tinned already, because the pads should look like this this copper color that you see here in the corner, but they already have solder on them. So you would say that those are tinned. Now what we can do is, and what I'm going to do is put flux down here and then put solder, little pillows of solder, and then we're going to do that same thing to the new battery. I'll just do a little flux on the battery. So use the back of the acid brush here to get a little bit of flux up. We got the flux there. I'm going to lean in here and put it on. Now the solder will flow wherever the flux is at. So if you glob your flux on there and you connect it over to another electrical component, it will bridge. So you got to be very careful. So we're going to get the iron back out, swipe it on our wet sponge, get it looking chromy again. Going to heat up our pad a little bit and then put solder on it. Okay, we flowed just a little bit of solder on there. Like I said, put a little bit on that iron before you put the iron away. I'm going to be really pedantic and clean this one more time. So now we got little pillows of solder, which is exactly what we want. Nice, clean, fresh solder. We're gonna get the flux on there. Gonna do, oh yeah. So now we gotta check our battery here to make sure we do the right polarity. So it doesn't really say what way is what polarity, but we can check it here with the multimeter. If I measure the voltage and it's positive, it'll be positive on the red lead. So we got 3.32. Now if I switch them around, which you guys can't see, let me slide this up here. There we go. So if I do the negative lead to the positive side, I get a negative voltage reading. So if I do the positive lead to the positive side, I get a positive voltage reading. So this side with this bridge over it is the positive side. And if we take a look back at our chip here, we have a positive indication right here. So now what we're going to do is get some flux onto the back of this. And the only goal here is to make an electrical connection. So we don't need to glob it on there. I really shouldn't need any more solder than is already on. So we're just going to make sure that we put our positive side on the positive, negative on the negative, get them rotated. That looks pretty good. So we're going to get the iron, wipe it off on our sponge. There's already a little bit of a pillow of solder on there. I'm going to hold the battery down with my finger and do the positive lead. Kind of move it around there. Now I want to cover up that lead all the way, so I'm just going to get a little more solder. I don't love how that looks. So I'm going to put a little bit more flux on there. Hit it again. Put more on the other side too. It's definitely connected, but not as well as I would like it to be. A little solder on here. I think that's good. There we go. So now I don't need to hold it because the other side is already way down. There we go. And that's it for the solder. So I'm going to put a pretty good amount on there, put it back in its cradle and turn it off. The last step that we're going to do here is we're going to clean it off, because solder flux is sticky and you don't want it to attract any sort of corrosion into your brand new battery installation. So now we're going to check the voltage one more time, kind of on the edge of these, the corners of these traces, just to make sure we have a good connection. And the voltage should read a little bit lower than 3.3, just because it's going through the circuit now. Oh, there it is, 3.3. Okay, so that looks good, and let's put this back together and throw it in the Gameboy. So now we're just going to remove the tape. You really don't want to drip tape onto this part right here. Or drip tape. Drip solder. You do not want to do that. Take a good look at this. It's a little bit of residue there. You can see it right by this chip, where some like capillary action of the tape kind of sucks some flux under there. So we'll just hit that with the ISO and the brush there. That looks great. So now we're gonna throw it back in our cartridge here. And you do need a specific bit for this, so for certain Game Boy games. So if you can see it, kind of a hexagon. So let's fire it up here. And I'll hold it this way here. Well, we didn't break anything. Yep, so Pokemon Gold deletes your game without the battery there. So now I should be able to save and come back to the game.